So we want to get report backs from the three groups. Can I suggest that we get a report back? We allow only questions for clarity, if there are any questions for clarity, but we don't want to engage in discussion until we've had all three report backs. So if your question of clarity could in fact wait until you can engage in the debate, rather do that. So let's get the three report backs, and then let's open up for discussion and see how we can bring it together. So which group?
Makam School.
Okay, Makam is definitely moving there, winning the race to the front. And the rest of the groups mustn't. And the rest of the groups mustn't feel left out. We were outside, that's why they could do it so beautifully.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to summarize what we discussed in the group. I'm not going to touch on everything, because if I go there, we had about 8 people talking non-stop, and I wouldn't be able and I wouldn't be able to cover everything, but I'll just summarize the discussions. And we were requested to check 3 priorities, and what came up was we said there's one that is very important that we think we could all concentrate on, because this is a time bomb already going through stages of explosion, and that is Iskcon. But there were other priority issues that we thought are important, particularly on the just transition, on reclaiming power, decentralization of our electricity supply. And we felt that all these issues all come to the Iskcon crisis that we're facing, the time bomb that is slowly exploding. It has, some of the has exploded. But when we said on the Iskcon crisis, we said so much that is taking place, and I think during the past month, we've heard on the Iskcon hearings in Parliament as to what is happening. But there's been a lot of work that has been done over the years by various stakeholders, from labor, from civic organizations, concentrating on Iskcon reclaiming our power and the decentralization of electricity supply in the country. One of the issues that was highlighted was the financing, the debt that Iskcon finds itself in. And that debt, we said at the end of the day, it's us who are supposed to pay for cost recovery through tariffs and through tariffs particularly, and also seeing Iskcon taking a different way, not being low carbon as indicated through legislation and regulations in the country. We said that the mineral energy complex is still playing an important role within on how Iskcon is at the state of Iskcon now. And what we also have said that it is quite important for us to ensure that we don't allow more loans to come into Iskcon. But we know that Iskcon attracts a lot of loans because our country systems are set that are top-notch. You know, if you look at the laws of the country, regulations, and the government guarantors, so Iskcon is able to attract those loans. But in essence, what Iskcon loans or the debt is, it's more or less the quarter of our budget in the country, more or less. I'm not sure whether it's 1/3 or a quarter of the budget or half of the budget of the country. We had also spoken about what do we do with Iskcon, and there were suggestions that we need a new Iskcon. And new Iskcon, maybe we need an alternative Iskcon, a public utility. But then there were a lot of discussions around that, particularly people saying maybe we should reform Iskcon, but it cannot be reformed. We need something totally, it has got to be overhauled, and we have something alternative. But then what also would inform that would be the kind of future energy system for the country, which we continuously are talking about, and we're not yet at the same understanding as to what sort of future energy system for South Africa would be. Would that be low carbon, or would that still be much more carbon intensive? But then we also need to take into consideration some of the factors that actually drive us to say we need something alternative. For example, the issue around climate change. And according to the electricity regulation in the country, any energy source that we decide on in the country has got to be low cost and also low carbon, so that we don't have the increasing greenhouse gas emissions. We said that Iskcon had failed because there was no political will to invest much more in renewable energy technologies, which we felt that it was possible, but then because of how Iskcon is being managed, particularly the influence from the mineral energy complex, and we continuously being told that there's more coal in the country and clean coal, which is a lie. But then these are some of the issues that actually have informed us that we need an alternative public utility system. But then how do we get to that? We said that it's quite important for civil society organizations, civic organizations that would include labor, social movements, environmental justice organizations, religious sector, all the sectors in the country, particularly civic organizations, to come together, have a discussion, or agree on minimum, actually concentrate on what we agree on rather than what we differ on. For example, there's still a difference around coal with the labor, because labor, they would say they want to protect jobs, and coal has got a devastating impact on the environment and the atmosphere at all. So we said that this is quite important, and we felt that this may be a kick-off of that kind of discussions and platforms. We know that it's not an overnight thing. We're not going to agree today, but let's continue talking, persuading each other, clarifying each other, informing each other, so that at the end of the day, we could come to some sort of a common understanding. And we said on the point of engagement, there's been engagements by different players around Iskcon, either with Iskcon or whether with the department or whether with parliament. This has been ongoing by different sectors, but the only problem is that it has been fragmented, and we need to find a way, and that's why it was important for us as civil society, as labor, and all the other sectors to come together and agree as to what do we do with this monster. So to say, I'm sorry for those who are working for Iskcon. And there's been different engagements. Labor, I'm not sure if they have done that, but I know in the civil society sector, we have had various meetings with the Department of Energy, with the chairperson of Iskcon, the board of Iskcon, and there was also an NGO forum within Iskcon. But some of these initiatives didn't work as to how we wanted them to work. And some are stalled, but some are continuous. But engagements are continuous. There's been various letters that have been written highlighting various issues around Iskcon. But what we think is important for us is to have the kind of alternative energy system and energy democracy where ordinary people, all of us, would be involved in decision-making processes, and that's why we're calling for an alternative system. There's been a lot of stuff that has been discussed, and I did tell the group that I'm going to summarize because, that was too much.
Yeah.
I hope my summary suffices. Please don't.
Any questions of clarity? Okay. Shall we move on then to the second group, and then we can try and you the second group?
No, I wanted to ask a question.
Okay, yeah.
On the teams to understand the state utility, whereby the utility is supposed to borrow So how is it going to be sustainable? Because decisions are being taken to erode the financial side and sustainability of the company. Now you are saying we need to cap the borrowing plan. Now, on the issue of going forward, how is Iskcon going to be sustainable?
Can I in fact leave that as a question I think it's a more substantive discussion, and it relates to, once we agreed on what we're going to take up, that becomes one of the substantive discussions. So let's note it as I think a substantive issue. Brian?
We didn't agree that we should cut Eskom's finances. So I think we said we need to look at and analyze the nature of Eskom's debt and do an audit of that and be able to make proposals about how to deal with Eskom's financial side.
Okay. Can I ask the second group to come up? The reporter from the second group is not here. Yes, of course he is here. Sorry, I missed you. Yeah.
Morning, comrades. My name is Pamanda. Okay, from the group, we have diagnosed that Eskom has very serious challenges. One of them, which is there's a challenge of management. So we have come to a point that we think that we must not transform Eskom. We must overhaul it at large. Meaning that from bottom to the top level, from labor to the highest level. So we have discussed with the group that we need to have sort of Eskom Indaba or Eskom People Summit, where we get all civil groups, all labor unions, and investors involved in one group, so that we can unpack issues that we are having with Eskom. And in one of our discussions, we touched on the issue of debt of 600 billion. We came to a diagnosis that Eskom is not directly the utility that is responsible for this debt. The service providers that we are giving, these private service providers that have been given opportunities to give service to Eskom, are the ones who are giving these problems, particularly through price fixing and false information provided to the service to the client. In part of our discussions, we wanted to educate our communities on issues of Eskom, on issues of renewable energy. Again, it was important that IPPs should be nationalized so that we are able to monitor and know all the things that are happening in our utility and its service providers. One of the important things we have current projects that are taking place in as part of Eskom. So we are saying, what is the situation? What is happening with the current projects, like the panel solar projects? What is the situation, and how do we see our people being part of those things, those projects? And then we have come to this point that we need to raise awareness, comrades. The nation should know our position as the people who have met here, and through that we need to go and start to educate our people on our eyesight and insight. Working on that, we want to use this Chinese loan as a form of raising awareness through, I think, protestations and marches, so that we get people more involved in having attention on what we are discussing. Okay, one of the questions was, should we have another service provider for renewable energy. We say we are having a challenge of 600 billion, a debt of 600 billion. Why can't we give Eskom an opportunity to exercise renewable energy? We are saying Eskom should be. We must not have a second company or a second business to push the renewable energy. Let us use the one that we are having, but let us resolve issues in Eskom. Let us overhaul Eskom as a whole, then introduce renewable energy into Eskom. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of clarity there? Okay, so let's go on to the third group very quickly. Who's the third group? Great, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so ours was group 3, and we spent a lot of time looking at the issues. We decided to focus particularly on Eskom and to try and keep it within the title of the conference so that we stay focused. So the first thing we looked at was the question of governance. That a lot of the problems stem from the form of governance, the corporatization of Eskom. We felt that that wasn't sufficiently discussed also in this conference. We should have gone into more depth into the question of governance. So the proposal there was that we should call for the reconstitution of the board of directors, and this is an also position already, that we should bring back the electricity council, which had representation from the unions, but should also include communities. And it was stressed very strongly that the representation, the kind of tripartite type representation that we see in the CETAs or in NEDLAC should be how the board is constituted, but the working class representation should be a majority. So it shouldn't just be, but we can live with a third for the meanwhile, but we should push for a majority say. Then we looked at the question of the Chinese deals came up, and that was more as part of the governance question that there has to be a very strong demand for transparency in these deals. People need to know what deals are being considered, never mind going down. Then the second broad area that we looked at was the orientation of Eskom. So that's where, much like the first group and actually indeed the second group, looking at the purpose of Eskom and serving the development challenges of South Africa, that we don't just want a low carbon or a green capitalism, we want Eskom to serve the needs of the development needs of the country. And we talk particularly about jobs, about poverty, about housing, about transport, and taking inspiration from Uruguay, how we could use Eskom to drive a bigger transformation of our society. And then an important point was made about, in that planning, that one national plan can also go wrong if you don't take into consideration quite different local contexts in different parts of the country. Then we looked at the structure of Eskom. So we talked about, and these we also said with a lot of these things, these weren't positions. That in an hour and a bit you can't come to very strong conclusions on a lot of these things. Some of these issues are still we need to find out more, think about more, and figure out what our position is. But around the structure, that maybe a hybrid of both horizontal and vertical integration is something to be considered. We talked about the transmission issue, and that maybe, well, that an important principle is that transmission has to be protected, and that it needs to be protected as a public asset, and that it might be wise to separate transmission out so that it is protected and it's not contaminated by, for example, the debt of Eskom as a whole. But that was an unresolved issue that we need to think about more, but that was some thinking. Then we spent quite a lot of time talking about the IPPs And basically the conclusion there was similar to group 2, except we use stronger language, which is to invoke section 25 and to expropriate the IPPs. And they should fall under a new public utility for renewable energy. And again, to kind of protect the public renewable sector from the mess that is Iskcon currently. And then there was a tactical point raised about how one would propose that new public utility, and one should propose it not as a competitor to Iskcon, but as a cooperative partner with Iskcon that manages the renewable side of things. Comrades, I hope I covered all the issues. And then we looked at how to take things forward and points of mobilization. So one was around using the knowledge that we've gained here to get out through social media and share the knowledge that we've gained. 2 is to talk to Lebo about the 3-day strike. 4 was the job summit. We just mentioned it, that it's something to think about. And then there was quite some excitement about the idea about how do we keep working together as this group, because there is the sense that we often have these talk shops that we don't, we get on with our lives, as Sandra said, and maybe in a year's time we come back together again and have the same old discussion. So the agreement, if I understood it correctly, was that Shumi at AIDC will coordinate an email list that everyone's invited to join, and that people can choose study clusters, if you like. So separate email lists for groups of people who want to continue working together as individuals. We also talked about mandates from organizations, so forth. But as individuals across organizations who are present here interested in particular dimensions. And FES can be approached to fund this. And there's also an invitation, TNI runs something called, it's an Energy Democracy International e-list. It's just an information sharing around the world. So people are invited to join that as well. I'll give Shumi the details and people can join up. And then there was a suggestion that perhaps we could also think about organizing international study tours to go and look at some of the good cases of nationalized public or renationalized public utilities or well-functioning public utilities that we would see as models that we could learn from. So that was the last idea.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of clarity there? Right, let's get straight into it. Okay, so I think all the groups. Oh, sorry, Richard. I tried to.
It was just a little point of elaboration, if I may, and maybe I was here when I wanted to hear, but we particularly mentioned a study group. So not just email lists, but that there would be actually people whose organizations would mandate the people to work together with others to develop the knowledge base, not to represent, but that it would be a study group that collectively develops the knowledge base. And that's what we've got me going with saying, well, you should probably talk to me with my PES hat on about that one.
Okay, thank you. All right, so from what the 3 groups have reported back, it seems like everybody's agreed. The first 2 groups talked about the need to overhaul rather than reform Iskcon, whatever the difference between those 2 terms are. The 3rd group gave more content to that. They talked about, which I think came up, I know, in group 2 and probably came up in group 1. They talked about, reconstituting the board of directors, bringing back the council, the electricity council, etc. They gave more content to what it would mean to reform or overhaul, overhaul Iskcon. I think one group spoke about a separate transmission entity, which I don't think the other 2 groups touched on or didn't raise. One group argued strongly that renewable energy should be brought into Iskcon. The argument being that energy should be dealt with as one holistic issue rather than as different, based on different sources. And that group then also argued that the logical conclusion of that would be that the IPP should be nationalized back into Iskcon. The issue, yeah, so I think a pre-issue almost was raised by the first group that we all agreed we need a new system and we need a new Iskcon, and the two interlink very profoundly, so that it's difficult to talk about a new Iskcon without a deep understanding of what a new, kind of a different energy system would look like. So they're big links between those two issues. And then I think the first group raised the issue of the debt and finances and the need to explore exactly what the implications of that are and how to deal with it. So there were a couple of points where we needed, almost to go away and do more work, which was the debt. It was the governance issue that the third group raised. So I think those were the kind of big issues. So, I mean, I don't think that there's going to be major disagreements. I think it's as we kind of identified once before we broke into groups, it's the transmission and whether there should be a separate transmission entity and whether there should be a separate renewable energy entity. Those seem to be the areas where we probably have most need for debate. The other issues are kind of, we're recognizing the need to explore finances, governance, etc., and look at how we overhaul those. Oh, and the other important thing was that all the groups spoke about the need for kind of much more grassroots discussion around what should happen to Iskcon and how and the energy system overall. The second group raised the issue that we should ultimately be calling for something like a people's summit, where we can put proposals and have discussions around what a transformed electricity system and Iskcon would look like. So I hope I'm discussing that. I'm leaving the issues of how we move, of the concrete actions, to a second discussion. Let's concentrate now on some of the content points, and then we can move on to the, some of the proposals around how we take this forward. So anybody want to open up, say how we resolve these issues, argue out their position?
Thank you. In one or two groups that we have discussed the issue of keeping Iskcon as the main entity that will introduce what you call renewable energy. I'm thinking that we want our communities to be involved. Why can't we have some sort of community cooperatives? We don't come up with one cooperative, but community cooperatives that will be in partnership with Iskcon, making sure that we introduce the system. And my main concern, we are having a large portion of young people who are unemployed, some are educated, some are not. I'll say we need to use these young people to equip them with skills and knowledge of this energy, this new revolution of energy on our path to implementation.
Okay. Can we, so I mean, I think that kind of issue, the kind of community cooperatives would fit into an understanding of our electricity system as a whole. So we definitely need to have that discussion and debate, but maybe let's try and focus on Iskcon for now and how we take, yeah?
I'm going to answer your question. In our group, I think when our here was the protein, we also put a proposal that one, what do we want to see out of this contract? Because we cannot keep on discussing healthcare, but we need an action. So we also suggested that if we can have a study group amongst ourselves, that will do the work for us. And then after either quarterly or 4 months, we reconvene and give us development. So that there must be an interaction to make sure it's documented and there's something going on within the system than just making this conference a talk show.
Okay. Was that the same group? Okay.
Yes, there was a group.
Yeah. Okay, Richard?
Just a question, comment. Are you saying that you would see the development of community-based energy initiatives projects as an alternative to a new parastatal, or as something which should be served by a parastatal or by some. There could be some kind of agency. We don't have to call it a parastatal that enables community-driven initiatives. But I wasn't sure if you were saying that rather we should have community-based initiatives and they should just be supported by Iskcon. Is that the suggestion?
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't want to necessarily get into a dialogue. I've got Daniel, Dinga, Vish, Brian.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't frame all these ideas as proposal to be debated today. Maybe more as research questions that could be addressed by this study group that Group 3 had suggested. Because that might lead to restart the conference that we began 2 days ago, and they are all very relevant questions. For instance, the issue about the cooperatives, that has to do with what Sean was talking about, new forms of horizontal integration. So it's not necessarily an alternative to creating a new parastatal, but maybe there is room to combine different alternatives. But all these have to be researched.
Okay.
I'm definitely with Daniel, because when you put that on that, I'd raise my hand, that by putting up these, what are we hoping to do? Do we think we're going to resolve these big questions in the hour that's left? These are big questions. They've been debated before. And some of them may require some work and testing. And so it's important to put them as issues where there are questions. But I think that we're not going to be able to resolve them. They need some work. I mean, it's again, I don't want to, even the question of governance,
That's a big one.
It's a big one because it's important to say what must replace it. But the Iskcon Convention Act and we've got to amend that, and there are a couple of things that we will have to, the shareholder compact, and so those need work, and I just think it's important to record them as areas which we don't, and they can form part of what we do next and trying to the new parastatal now. Yeah, that's just, yeah.
Okay. So what the suggestion is coming out that what we should rather be doing is identifying particular areas where more work needs to be done and consolidating that, because I think that's partly what came out of the groups, the kind of identification of where more work needs to be done. So maybe we need to just comment on if we think that there are areas, sort of to emphasize areas that we think need to be worked on, or areas that, were neglected or didn't get enough attention. So I've noted, under the overall electricity system, the issue of community cooperatives, obviously the issue of local government, although it wasn't mentioned specifically. Under Iskcon, it's the debt finance, governance, transmission, renewables. Vish?
So I agree with the direction of the conversation. And I think in general, the past day and today has been very valuable in constructing a new imaginary, a new narrative around how we think about these problems. And so the terms of debate, the terms of reference for research, I agree, should deepen that. This is what I want to propose. I think in terms of the first proposition around Iskcon and democratizing Iskcon, I think we've got to strengthen that proposition in terms of talking in terms of worker-friendly restructuring. Something that centers the interests of workers around this issue, because it's a big concern for workers, rightfully so. There's the whole dimension of nationalizing coal mines, which came up in our group. I think we're going to run away from that, particularly if we are looking for a cost-effective way of managing the crisis in Iskcon. So that's on the first proposition. On the second proposition around nationalizing renewable energy and a new utility and so on, we might want to couple that with, and then this probably sits even in the first proposition, debating and unpacking the industrialization of renewables in South Africa. I think that's come up in this conversation. I think it's a very crucial issue, and we shouldn't see these things in isolation. My last point is that I think one of the gaps there, and it relates to the kind of idea of cooperatives that's free floating, is that maybe we need a third leg in the conversation, which is about local government, regulation, policy for socially owned renewables, including cooperatives and so on. From even your own presentation yesterday, it's clear that that's a crucial part of the new energy system.
Okay, so thanks. So, I mean, I think it's quite hard, I think what people are saying, it's quite hard to separate things out, to kind of hone in and just focus on one, because they're all so interlinked. Brian?
So, I think it's important what Inga is saying, that we, and others have been saying, that we need a kind of collaborative process of getting more information and understanding, researching some of the critical issues that are at stake in relation to Eskom and the public utility and the challenges it's facing, not least in terms of a so-called energy transition. So I think that's important. But at the same time, we face a very imminent crisis in Eskom. And I just want to say that I think that it's not something that's far off, this idea of breaking up Iskcon. Let me just explain by saying that it was just a month or so ago that the Argentinian economy went into a deep crisis and had to go to the IMF. Same sort of time, the Turkish economy tanked and is in a very deep crisis, and again is under threat of having to impose structural adjustments, etc. Just these last few days, the South African rand lost 6.5% of its value. We've got a loss of the rand over the last year of more than 25% of its value.
India also.
So the point I'm wanting to make is, if you look at the crisis in Eskom financially, 400 billion rand, estimated to go to 600 billion rand in the next couple of years. You've got a South African economy in a deep, a growing debt crisis, as I said on the first day, approaching 60% debt to GDP ratio, which is seen as the benchmark debt crisis situation. So, and we've got the credit rating agencies over our neck, and we see, I think, our government looking and prioritizing ways in which it can satisfy its creditors. And so the issue of the breakup of Eskom and reducing its potential to have a further burden on the overall debt crisis of the country, because just at the beginning of this year, we had to put in another influx of money into Eskom. The same is happening with Denel, FAA, and Transnet, etc. So the crisis is deep. Something is going to give, and I think that we ought to start thinking about a collaboration which says, like that campaign, Save Our SABC, maybe we need something like Save Our Eskom. But such a campaign needs to be based on a clear set of proposals in terms of what we're going to do with the financing, what are we going to do with governance, what are we going to do with the structure of Eskom, including, does it take on renewable energies, does it hive it off, does it hive transmission, etc. I'm very scared of the discussion about hiving off things of Eskom when it's government headed. It's no public statement yet, but I think government is moving towards saying we're going to break up Eskom into more management parts as part of the first process towards privatization. So for me, the defense of Eskom as a non-fragmented public utility is critical.
Okay, so it seems to me that everybody's agreeing on the need to collaborate, the need for further research, but there are different positions. Now, we could say that let's try and, collaborate, and in that process of collaborating, whether it's through study groups or whatever, we thrash out the different positions. Or we could say, look, there are different positions, and what we should be calling on is for people to be developing their different positions, so that ultimately we can come together and then try and thrash out. You know what I mean? So that people are ultimately coming together with clearly thought out, researched positions, rather than trying to work it out in the process of collaboration. So I'm just wondering if it's not better to develop clear positions and then thrash it out, rather than thrash it out in the process of developing clear positions.
Now, I was going to suggest differently. It's difficult to even collaborate from a premise of not trusting each other where we come from. It will be important to say, what are the areas of where we agree, and what are the areas where we are doubtful or we don't agree. But you may find that it's not even in where we disagree. It may be that we are not clear about where the other comes from. And if it is that, I'm just going to make an example. If there is group A and trade union B who are not clearly understanding each other on a certain subject matter, we should also emphasize the need to not meet when there are occasions, to also try to get closer to each other, to understand where the other comes from. I think organizations can be able to, if we encourage that, they can be able to work out certain other issues which somewhat may not be a total disagreement, but may be misalignment with regards to understanding, so that people may align, even if it is that people will end up disagreeing still. But at least from that, trying to meet outside the event like this one, at least we will know where we stand with each other with regard to a certain subject matter, not the grayness, because some of the disagreements, some of the things that we may think we disagree in, we may not be disagreeing. We may be agreeing but disagreeing on this and that we can be able to understand each other on. I agree that collaboration is very, very important. But let's say, what are we agreeing on? What are we disagreeing on? And see if we can be able to sort that out without delaying working together. So it means as soon as possible, let's find these areas which are doubtful and gray, and let's try to thrash them out. But let's not wait for these meetings to do that. Let's have some meetings in between these events so that we may be able to be clear with each other.
Thanks, Sandra. I'm just remembering what Sebastian said yesterday about how groups working together in Uruguay didn't actually all agree on everything. In fact, there were people with quite different positions on some things, but they managed to work together on key issues. And so on this issue of Iskcon, for example, I haven't heard anyone disagree with the need to protect transmission from private and foreign ownership. How we do that, whether it should be as fragmenting Iskcon or if there's some other way to do it, we haven't really looked at how do we best protect transmission. Some of us tend to assume that we just need to get it away from the generation first as far as possible, but those people are changing us. So we do seem to have common ground that we want to protect transmission. Maybe one of the things the study group will be tasked with looking into is to fully explore the alternatives for doing that, including the sort of notion of somehow ring-fencing the transmission assets without necessarily breaking up Iskcon as a single commercial entity. So, yeah, that gives us a common position from which to depart, but to elaborate more specific and articulate detailed positions.
Okay, sorry, and Rio, you had your hand up.
Yes, so the point that Ryan makes is a point that resonates with me. But
talking about or deciding to break up Iskcon can be quite dangerous at this time. And that's why in our commission, in our group, we said we must explore the separation between Iskcon and the transmission. So that must go through a process of investigation and study and engagement and discussion. Because we worried about deciding upfront where our decision might not be evidence-based and empirical, and then where they might be wrong and dangerous and fatal. And I'm saying that based on a number of issues. One, I mean, for a long time now, there's been people who've been speaking in government and outside government, in business, about privatizing Iskcon, about breaking up Iskcon, carving out Iskcon, co-managing, inviting that as activities. So we're saying we must be very guarded when we raise that issue. Currently, as we speak, even with the current executive and board, that discussion, there's consultants that are working hard on how to break up Iskcon and privatize Iskcon. The Rothschilds are involved, traffic buttons are involved, the driver manuals are involved. So we raise that we play a little bit careful around that area. But we're saying Iskcon cannot be kept as it is. So that statement must continue to inform that debate. Because as NUMSA, I don't have a separate committee mandate about the breaking up of Iskcon. That's talking. The second point is, and my worry and concern about resolving to say that Iskcon must not receive any loans, any funding. I'm not sure if I understand that correctly, but I'm worried about that. Was in our proposal discussed and agreed upon is that any trade deals, any loan deals must be transparent. We must be part of that so that the terms can be dictated by the working class, not by other forces, other foreign and neoliberal and capitalist space. So to say no funding at all, I mean, we're killing us from. I don't think that might be the proper way to do. So let's start with all these issues. How do you overhaul Iskcon, including the funding aspect? And now we raising that. I think I wanted to raise those two points.
Okay, so thanks for that. I think what you were making me think is that there's a sense of where, you're talking about the need to defend Iskcon, not because we want to defend the sort of corruption and the what, but because we want to defend our energy from being privatized. It's kind of to prevent the privatization, the handing over of energy into private hands. So there's a sense of almost immediate, without even doing any research or anything, there's a sense of, and presuming that the unions as the mass-based organizations that are most directly connected with Iskcon, NUMSA and NUM, would take the lead in the defense of Iskcon. But there's a sense of almost demands or issues that we could probably almost immediately agree on in relation to defending Iskcon. The immediate demand that there be transparency, that there be accountability, etc., etc. So maybe, that we clear on these financing issues, we're clear on the debt. So maybe that's a kind of a clear set of immediate issues that we could all agree on, that, with the lead of the unions, all of us could support that kind of a call. Because it does seem that part of the problem is the secrecy, this lack of clarity around a whole lot of things. So I don't know if that is something that we can kind of agree on, that there's an immediate set of ways in which we can defend Iskcon. Yeah. I'm going to take that as given that yes, all agree. Where to from here then? I mean, I think we're agreeing that, I think we are actually fairly clear on where we agree. And I think we're clear on some of the differences, and we're clear on some of the issues that need a lot more working out so that we can work out if we're in disagreement or not in agreement. So exactly how all the different components of an electricity system would fit together. We might end up being in agreement, we might have areas of disagreement, the role of local government, cooperatives, community organizations, etc., and how that all fits together with the public utility. We need much more work on that. We need much more work on issues relating to Iskcon. So, I mean, I think we agreed on those as areas of research that need to be taken forward out of this conference. But where to from here? What are the concrete steps that we are saying we can take following this conference? Dinga.
So maybe between this summary of what we agree on and areas of work, mention the fact that my group raised, that on the table is a proposal for increased tariffs. And that the multi-year price determination number 4 is on the table to increase electricity tariffs. And that is something that we can work on together, and that it can also raise the questions of alternative to the cost drivers and all of that. And it can also be public mobilization. It affects citizens, it affects people, it puts the issue of Iskcon at the center. It's something that's there. I mean, it's not going to go away. Even if we don't resolve it, it's there.
Okay, so that's almost like a second area that we can easily work together on and come up with common positions. Okay. Are there other, yeah?
Thanks, Sandra. Just one point as we're talking about the areas of focus as we are going to embark on this research. We cannot speak about shaping Iskcon into the correct direction, then we exclude the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy played a huge role to be where Iskcon is today, because there are underlying factors. If you are going to talk about the depth of Iskcon, we have to talk about the underlying factors that led to the borrowing plan. We have to talk about the underlying factors that led to the wrong forecasting of the IRP, whereby the government went on to agree for bid window 1, 2, 3, leaving all the triple challenges of the country, absorbing the foreign nationals, come and build, although we don't need. So what I'm saying, the Department of Energy is going to play a role as well if it's going to shape Iskcon. The issue of the tariffs that is being raised there, it's what has been already been rolled out by the program of Department of Energy through the ERA Act, the Ministerial Determination, Section 34, whereby the minister is not in consultation with Iskcon to say, Iskcon, in terms of meeting your demand, do you need another additional capacity? They are doing their own program, not in consideration that even though we are going to have foreign direct investment, how is it going to affect the unemployment rate? Because seemingly, all the foreign direct investment that we had in the country for the past 4 or 5 years, they didn't change the unemployment rate. So that's why I'm saying, if there is no coordination between Iskcon and TOE, if TOE is doing their own thing, then Iskcon is bound to fail. Iskcon today finds itself being compelled to buy energy they don't need, which leads to the rising electricity tariffs. You understand? So the bid windows that were recently signed now by Jeff Radek are going to result into the rising electricity tariffs. If you look into 2014-2015 increase in terms of revenue of Iskcon, 8 billion from the increase, 6 billion was absorbed by the ITPs. So where does that take Iskcon? So Iskcon now is forced to borrow more to run their operations. So that's why I'm saying behind the debt, there is something that we need to uncover. So for as long as Department of Energy is doing their own thing and saying, no, Iskcon, you are going to buy whether you want to or not, we're going to sit with these problems.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, I mean, I think the comrade is raising an important point about the fact that Iskcon is to a large extent governed by the policy set by national government. And so that we need to be addressing that that policy area of what, what national government sets up as policy, what they drive from a national government side. So yeah, I think that's a useful addition. Are there any other? So I mean, I think we've identified the broad range of areas that we need more research in. We're saying that there's some immediate sets of issues that we could be collaborating around, demanding transparency and accountability, particularly in relation to financing. The issue of the tariff proposals. I think the other ones that have come up are the Chinese loans. I think other things that have come up at various times is the IRP 2018 and the climate change goal. So these are all things that we could be working together around or collaborating around. And I think it's the question of who takes the lead in this work. And it could be different organizations taking the lead in relation to different aspects, and how we can kind of collaborate. And obviously there are a lot more people and a lot more organizations than are sitting in this room. I mean, I thought that slide that Tasneem put up yesterday, all the different initiatives that are happening around energy in South Africa are a little bit ridiculous in some ways, because there's so many different forums and places and organizations doing so many different things. So I'm waiting for guidance on how we take these two issues forward. Rebecca?
Yeah. I think I'm going to raise this, maybe that could be in line with what Mbodi raised earlier on. But I'm just checking with Labour if it's possible for it, particularly NUMSA, to revisit what was then called the National Electricity Campaign, something like that. A lot more work around Iskcon was done there, including the electricity tariff increases, working with NUMSA, financing of Iskcon, etc. Is it possible to revive such an initiative if we were to work together around these issues without underestimating the need for civil society and labor to find one another, because as Mbodi was saying, somewhere along the way we've lost one another. So how do we now seek to gel together around these issues?
Any NUMSA comrades want to respond to that? Comrade Wheel?
No. Why me? Or not you? No, but I was going to say in response directly to that, the attempt to revitalize a closer working relationship between the labor movement and the rest of other working class formations is an attempt to close the gap that you are referring to. The Working Class Summit that took place in July is supposed to put an end to all of these battles in silos. It's supposed to bring together labor and unite it with the unemployed, with the people who are battling for a cleaner environment, people who are fighting against women abuse, people who are fighting for evictions in the farms or in the urban areas, people who are battling for housing, and people who are battling for all manner of things, including water, into a single struggle. So I think our responsibility as labor formations that are present in this workshop is to basically crystallize the resolutions that are coming out here, to reinforce what I believe is already a very progressive platform that has been developed by that working class movement, and to make sure that there's actual campaigning around the issues we are raising in this workshop, and that then it's stop being an issues and concerns of the few in the bottom, but we take it out where it belongs, to the masses of the people, to resist this particular the privatization of Iskcon, and to demand that energy be socially owned, and that we resist the IPPs. We demand that the whole project be abandoned, and in order to save jobs and all of that. If we don't do that, I think we will, NUMSA will be doomed, together with the ADN and everybody else in that sector of the economy, and eventually all of us in the country will be doomed. And so I don't think we have options except to close that gap.
Thank you, Comrade. I think that's very good to hear, and I think it'll be good when with Labour leading such a Comrades, can we take this further now? I don't want to stop something, but I'm not sure that. I mean, I think we've identified, what we need to do. In terms of the kind of campaigning work, I think we're hoping that Labour will take the lead. There have been, proposals around collaboration around these issues. Can we take it further than that now, or do we call it to a halt and say thank you very much?
No, I'm just thinking that to further consolidate all the issues raised, maybe the platform that the GS is raising could be another useful one, leading to the October days of action. Maybe it's something that must be explored.
The October Days of Action, that's around a broad set of issues. It's not just around energy. Yeah. Okay. Fiona and then Richard.
Now I was thinking that in November, it comes with the Special Social Forum on Extractivism, which is bigger than mining. But I can't help feeling that there should be a link there to the discussions we've been having here and that social forum. Do people know about it?
No. Can you talk a bit more about it, maybe?
I don't know too much more, but I'm sure someone in the room does.
Anybody know more about the extractivism social forum? Brian, do you know? Yeah.
So, the World Social Forum takes place roughly every 2 years. In between that, there are occasions for more focused social forums. Out of a process that goes back quite a few years, several groups have been working on the issue of mining and extractivism, meaning processes of environmental and ecological destruction, financialization, all of these related issues. The idea is to convene over the 12th and 15th of November this thematic social forum that will look at alternatives to mining and extractivism, bring together different movements internationally that have been resisting extractivism and mining. So it's community groups, labor groups, NGOs, and all of these groups. They'll be convening here in Johannesburg. But it's a part of an international process of the World Social Forum constructing the space. And there's a strong hope that various collaborations will take place, not least around advancing a campaign around consent and the right to say no to destructive mining and extractivist projects.
So I think there definitely should be links made. Richard?
please to excuse my ignorance on this, it's a bit embarrassing, but I'm wondering if there's a copy of the common platform that was adopted at the Working Class Summit in July, and if anyone has it, they can put it on the screen at the moment. It sounds like it's something which is being considered as a platform that all of those here could participate in and support. And yeah, maybe it's remiss of me perhaps not to have already put myself up on that, but if there is a short version, it might be a productive use of our time right now to have a look at it.
Okay.
Question.
Okay. Comrade's going to call it up.
Okay, just wait.
Okay, while we're waiting for that, maybe you see, I remember the 2015 electricity crisis committee campaign conference, I can't remember what it was called, that we had in Johannesburg. Big conference. Coming out of that, we set up a working group made up of different people from different organizations, and we were going to collaborate around tariff determination and various issues. And I think that worked for a while, and then it kind of died. And I think the reason, and others who were involved in that at the time can say whether I'm right or wrong, but I think part of the reason was that there was no body at that time, no body or no organization at that time who was taking the lead in coordinating the process, making sure meetings happen, reporting people together, etc., etc. So it kind of collapsed. So I'm trying to avoid a situation where we don't want to walk out of here feeling like everything's left in the air and nobody knows, we could all go home and forget about everything and nothing's ever going to happen. On the other hand, I don't want us to walk out of here having set up a structure or a working group which is going to collapse in a few weeks because we're not able to maintain and support it. Ideally, as the comrades have been saying, so having said that, I think that there are two sets. To me, it's almost like there are two sets of things that we're saying are coming out of here. There is collaboration around particular issues and particular campaigns. It's the tariffs, it's the demand for transparency, it's the Chinese coal issue. Those are clear issues that we can collaborate around. Now, either we can walk out of here and say, well, we hope that the various organizations, and I'm looking particularly at Labour, who will take the lead on those issues and call the rest of us to support. Or we can try and work out now how we make sure that collaboration around those issues happens. So that's one set of issues. Concrete issues to collaborate on. Then there's a second set of issues that we've identified, and they're not mutually exclusive, but I think it's worth sort of distinguishing between them. Then there's a second set of issues which relate to the research and the kind of information gathering and the thinking through and the developing positions around, etc., that we're saying needs to happen, and we've identified a lot of the issues that we need that to happen around. So that's almost a separate process. So what I'm really seeking guidance from or a proposal on is how we can walk out of this room feeling that these two sets of things are not just going to vanish into thin air as soon as we walk out of here. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to push people towards? Actually tightening up? Or are we saying it's not possible for us to tighten up at this stage? That must maybe be done at a later stage. Maybe the first step is to produce a report from the conference and then see how we take it forward. Guidance.
I think that on some of the concrete things, we should ask if there's organizations that are willing to convene and coordinate. So for example, on the issue of the Chinese loans, and must say I'm a little bit conflicted about this focusing on the Chinese loan, but this whole, we know the Chinese Development Bank loan and the recent agreement with China in relation to developing a coal-fired power plant and all of that. I think there should be a group that convenes and coordinates work around that, so people can come together and discuss in more detail what exactly, other than transparency and information, do they want. And here I'm thinking maybe we must ask EarthLife Africa, given their work previously in this area, to take on that responsibility. In relation to the question of the tariff increases, etc., can we ask NUMSA to play that role, since they did that work 2-3 years ago of convening and bringing a campaign and people out on the streets around that. But that is not divorced from the question of research, as Dinka says, because how would you oppose the question of the tariff increases if we don't know what the basis is, and we don't deal with the cost drivers and all of these things? So there's some, but let's ask NUMSA to convene that. For me, I think what's important is the question of a work, and I'm struck by the example of what Sam and Sean were sharing in relation to the Labour Party in Britain and developing a proposal to deal with the energy transition, let's call it, or energy policy of the Labour Party government. I think we need to have such a kind of research group working on now all the kind of core issues related to dealing substantially with the process of Iskcon. And I think those of us who convened this conference should take the lead in coordinating that, getting cooperation and collaboration from other community groups, unions, etc., in that study. And that can be the basis, and these working groups, if you like, would be the basis for reconvening in a certain period of time once we've got something on the table to look at and to see how that can be taken forward in campaigning or engagement with the Department of Energy or government or whatever.
Okay. So that's a concrete proposal. Any responses or reactions to that? Are we in agreement?
I'm not opposed, but I don't know what you mean. I think you talked that previous people that attended this from 2016, you had a working committee that collapsed some other way, right? And then you also said how to relate it. But in support what Brand is saying, I think it's not too formal. Those are doing this research and the other doing these things, but I think this is important, also important that can we regroup this committee for us as a group to do our job. When they call us for report backs, then NUMSA and the other study groups, they will also report on their missions and everything to try the job of the group.
Okay. I mean, there's no guarantee that we'd be able to reconvene exactly as we are now. So I think the proposal is, you know, if NUMSA is able to lead on the tariffs, if EarthLife Africa, Comrade McCormick's not here anymore, but I think it's not only EarthLife Africa, I think it's Life After Coal, Pushback Coal. You know, they could take the lead there. So if they're able to do that, and then AIDC, TUID, TNI, you know, take the lead on putting together that research paper for on Iskcon, obviously drawing in unions, etc., etc. So maybe that's so that we're not trying to have one committee which is taking the lead on everything. We're rather farming it out, and we're saying different groupings will take the lead on different things. And I think that's maybe a more sustainable way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand, but now the challenge is, because you just mentioned that there's no grants that will recruit this, what informs them. Two, I think in our group, we were saying we need to have a working group, even if it's called Dialogue Performance, you know, and we convene. Because now, I think your perspective, for us, it's just a quick show. So we had a summit, we had a conference, it's done. But I'm going to say we'll meet after 2 years again, whereas there's something happening on the ground. So I think that's where I come from, you know, and you know, rather being informed that we should not let this collapse because government is speeding. Only it's just for a climate change, what's called. There's a document that they choose on the climate. Do we have it? Yes, it's online, but it's implemented. Now, there's IPPs, that is on the subject, they are not supporting. Who's going to stop that if I don't go to so we need, as this groups here, civil society, everything, we need to make an intervention to stop that train from going fast. That the guys, the train is fast, but you leave people behind, the community and the civil society, the back and the trade unions. They also want to have a bite when they move in train because remember what you're planning is going to affect the masses of the country.
Okay. No, I mean, I was only saying we from a funding point of view. So I mean, if we look to the funder, maybe there are possibilities of bringing us here. Yeah, because it would be a good idea to come back as regularly as possible in different configurations. Yeah. Any other comments on the proposal, the way forward? Are we okay? Have you got the...
Yeah, iteration, yes.
Oh. Huh. So maybe we can have a look at it quickly. Oh, it takes a while.
Takes a while.
Yeah, it's warming up.
You make this an international conference. I can see no one wants to see. It doesn't look it's happening in South Africa. What conference happened in South Africa? Okay. We're ready, Sandra, we're ready.
I'm not sure if we need to go through the whole thing.
Just to
Maybe point to the key relevant for this discussion.
Okay, thanks, Comrade. No, I think when Comrade GS actually came in and stepped in to clarify that we have on the 21st and 22nd of July, we had a very successful and historic working class summit that was held in Soweto. It was not going to be possible for this summit, comrades, without the formation, the civil formations, the NGOs, the labor. I think we all know very well, especially the comrades who are coming from the traditions of the 80s, how COSATU was built. It was built from the rank and file, from the civil formations. So as SAFTU, because we have a political duty to play in the crisis of workers and the working class as a whole, we agreed that we must go back to the traditions of fighting and militant labor movement. So this was very historic, comrades. 147 organizations gathered in Soweto for 2 days. Media was not there. We know we are not in control of media. The only key people that were interested, it was this network of civil society organization, mass-based organization. There were a number of concerns actually and discussions in the summit, comrades. And the summit actually discussed and touched base on all the working class issues, talking about the issues in the environmental sector, talking about the issues in jobs, talking about all the issues which we end up even the conference dividing it into commissions with comrades who are coming from the mining affected communities. So this was a draft from that summit. We also elected steering committees from various organizations to coordinate, to steer up, because it was not just a 2-day workshop to sit there, to gather, and then bye-bye. It was actually a meeting to discuss the attack and the crisis in the economy, not just in South Africa, but globally. So I'm not going to go through it, comrade, about the opening of the president,